I think I'm having a midlife crisis.
Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head.
I lost my wife, my son, my family. I lost my job, a good career over at Facebook. And it's like one moment I was attending my kid's birthday party, working my 9-to-5 job, and then the next day everything vanished as if none of it even happened. It was 2 years of dating, 4 years of marriage, raising a kid, changing all those diapers, transitioning from Google to Facebook, and all of that just vanished. And now it feels like I have been running in the wrong direction this whole time.
Went to the city and got so did it. She had to get a pimp, she couldn't make it on her own. Don't push me, cause I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head.
And all of your carefully laid out plans for life just don't seem to make sense anymore. There's a sense of restlessness, emptiness. I'm making stupid little YouTube videos for stupid little people, reading stupid little comments. And who knows, maybe everybody, they're just bots, right? Maybe nobody's watching this video except you and all those other views that we're getting. Maybe they're just those outsourced bots that I paid for. And I find myself questioning, what am I even doing here? We seem to be struggling all of our lives, trying to reach a state where we can just sleep in all day. And that seems to be the dream, where you don't even have to get up, you don't have to go work, you don't have to do anything, and you can just sit back and relax. And that's pretty much what I have now. I can just sleep in all day, and it really doesn't matter if I wake up or not every day. I have enough funds to sustain myself, and yet there's an emptiness to it. It doesn't feel fulfilling. At best, I'm a divorced dad. At worst, I'm a has-been YouTuber.
It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep them going under. It's like a jungle sometimes, it makes me wonder how I keep them going under.
At one moment in that video, he says, quote, "It feels like I have been running in the wrong direction this whole time." The reason for the crisis, whether it be midlife, quarter life, or at any other time, crisis can arise at any stage, at any age of your life. The reason why it's a crisis is that we construe meaning in our lives. Our sense of leading a meaningful life is not relative to the past. It's not relative to our own desires. It's not relative to our own motivations. It's relative to our idea of the future, our notions about the future that we assert here and now. We live with the future, and the future gives us a sense of meaning and purpose in the efforts we're making, the work we're doing here and now, in a profound way that's easy to lose sight of, especially if you have the same job for many years or you work towards the same goals for many years, and then suddenly, if you're separated from that vision of the future, the end to which those efforts were heading, then you've got a crisis. Doesn't matter if you're 20 years old, doesn't matter if you're 50 years old, doesn't matter if you're 80 years old, all right? The meaning of the efforts we make here and now is measured against an imaginary future outcome. And that's what we feel and experience as the meaning of our lives, right or wrong. And you can be wrong again and again and again. Why did I work so hard to learn Chinese? Because I had certain definite goals in mind, certain definite outcomes I was pursuing. I was cut off from those goals. It's a crisis. I realize now that my reasons for learning Chinese were wrong. As he says, it feels like I have been running in the wrong direction this whole time. All right? Like, as if you're trying to dig your way, trying to dig a tunnel, and then you find out this tunnel doesn't lead where you thought it was going to lead. It never can lead where you want it to lead. Doesn't matter how hard you dig. Doesn't matter how hard you work. You are just digging your own grave. You thought you were digging a tunnel that leads somewhere, and you're just digging a tunnel that leads down. And in my case, I feel like I'm almost an expert on this topic because I've been through this kind of crisis again and again and again. Before I worked hard to teach myself Chinese, I worked hard to teach myself Cambodian, right? Wasn't a hobby, wasn't for fun. That was part of the meaning of my life, right? That was part of the pursuit of a meaningful life for me, and was connected to research and humanitarian work and the study of history and all kinds of other things. And as soon as I'm cut off from the vision of the future, the viable future, the destination the tunnel is digging towards, as soon as it becomes clear that all this hard work I did on learning Cambodian is for nothing, that the destination is not going to be there, then I've got a crisis, right? Doesn't matter if I'm young, old, or what have you. Now, again, for me personally, tragically, these are not the only examples I can mention. I studied Cree and Ojibwe as languages, First Nations languages, Indigenous languages in Canada, with definite outcomes, definite future in mind. And all these, for me, are really linked to trying to make the world a better place. They're not just linked to a career in the sense of earning money. And then when it becomes clear that future is impossible, all the hard work I did in those languages for nothing, and this goes back, the first Asian language I learned was Korean. I was a very young man when I started studying Korean with a very definite idea of humanitarian work and politics and why I wanted to study Korean. And when I figured out pretty quickly in that case, there was no future of the kind I was looking for with Korean. Again, even that was a kind of tragedy. This side of my life, I mean, look, a lot of you watching this video, you're going to be expecting me to talk about my divorce and my ex-wife. Guess what? My ex-wife's a horrible human being. It's no big deal. People fall in love with the wrong person all the time. When I talk about my ex-wife in person or on the internet, most of the time what I want to do is emphasize the positive elements because the negative is so obvious. I mean, I remember saying to my mom a couple months ago, you never asked me why I fell in love with this woman. You never asked me what was good about this relationship, what was good about her. There were good things. But, you figure out at a certain point, the person I married is not the person I thought she was. And then you want to get divorced. And I'm really glad I dumped her. And eventually, legally, we'll get divorced. The legal paperwork has been in slow motion 100% at her choosing and her urging, her strategy. Her strategy has been to refuse to let me get divorced, to refuse to comply with the legal processes. So we're paying, a huge amount of money is being spent on lawyers. And it goes on and on. But regardless, the divorce and even the separation from my own daughter, it's not really a crisis in quite this same way. By contrast, a video I did a couple of months ago called University Tuition, the problem isn't the price, it's the value. That video actually, for me, really explains the crisis of my life. And it's not just a midlife crisis. It was already a crisis when I was 20 years old and 25 years old and 30 and 35. It's been a crisis again and again and again. And it's a crisis of pursuing something in education, whether the myriad university degrees I've pursued, the myriad areas of academic study I've pursued, and then realizing, as I say, you're digging a tunnel. You're not digging a tunnel to somewhere. You're digging a tunnel to nowhere. You're digging your own grave. And the harder you dig, the more effort you make, the more harm you're doing to yourself. I would say that right now about me and Chinese. Studying Chinese isn't just a waste of my time. It's destroying and discarding any possible positive future I could have. And that's a really crushing, emotionally and intellectually, it's a really crushing realization to come to, where you realize the things I've been pursuing, the things I've been striving for, the things I've put hours and hours of hard work into. It's not just they don't lead to a positive outcome. But when you look at it in terms of opportunity cost, when you look at your life, when you realize what you could be doing with that time, what you should be doing with your time now, you realize that you've been harming yourself by making what you thought of as positive efforts, because that objective you're working to, it isn't there. The tunnel leads straight down. For me, my first experience of this kind was when I was 11 years old, when I had just turned 11. 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall. Up to that point, like age 8, 9, 10, the future I saw, and this wasn't just from my parents, but what I saw on the news, what I saw in newspapers. At that end, you literally see the news. You don't really watch the news. You look at newspapers. You don't really read newspapers. You see headlines. You have a vague sense of what's going on politically in the world. My view of life on Earth and the future life I'd have as an adult was World War III, was a war between Russia and the United States. And my parents were both communists. They were communist extremists. So I imagined I would be fighting on the Russian side whereas most of my classmates in school would be fighting on the American side. It's unbelievable. I mean, it shaped my childhood at least as profoundly as growing up Christian would shape someone else's childhood. Growing up, a Catholic or some kind of mainstream form of Christianity, maybe not as extreme an influence as growing up in a cult, but hey, different cults for different folks, what can I tell you? And 1989 happens, and then all of a sudden you're told that future isn't coming. The nuclear bombs that you imagined could drop at any time, like the start of a race, the starter pistol going off. Any time nuclear bombs could start falling, and then World War III was here, and we were off, and it was a new era that I saw again on newspapers and TV news, but that you also had to imagine as a child watching cartoons that depicted. We're watching action movies, cartoons that showed the future, people fighting wearing spacesuits. And I remember asking my parents, well, you can't breathe the air when it's radioactive. So what, are people going to be wearing face masks like these spacesuits I see on cartoons? Is that how we're going to be fighting this war? What's going to happen? My idea of what my education was leading to and what I was preparing for up till 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall, was World War III, was this Cold War nightmare that I grew up with, a nightmare that to me was normal, a nightmare that defined the future I was getting ready for. And then one day, that was gone. There is no such thing as a midlife crisis. And I think it's sort of tragic the way we trivialize people's sorrow and people's struggle with this term. Oh, Tom, he's having a midlife crisis. Look, is it a crisis or not? I think people have a crisis at any age, at age 11, age 30, age 50, whatever it may be, when they realize, as this guy has just said, it feels like I've been running in the wrong direction the whole time. When you realize that your goals aren't just unattainable, that this isn't the destination you're working towards, and you suddenly have to reevaluate all of the work, all the effort you've made in the past, and what it is you're doing right now. And the crisis is, if you don't change, it's going to be a disaster. It's going to be worse and worse. The crisis is you have to act. You have to do something different. You have to be somebody different. You have to become a different person doing a different thing, or else. And you don't know what you're supposed to do. You don't know who you're supposed to be. And why? Because you had a clear vision of the future. You had some set of assumptions about the future that now, just now, to be false.
Da-da-da-da.